Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to proceed to calendar number 168, H.R. 5371.
That is in a quorum call.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
And I move to proceed to calendar number 168, H.R. 5371.
Clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar 168, H.R. 5371, an act making continuing appropriations and extensions for fiscal year 2026 and for other purposes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, can this be over now? Have the American people suffered enough? Or do Democrats need more? Democrats have snarled air traffic, they've damaged small businesses, they've left federal workers in line at food banks, they've jeopardized food assistance. Food assistance, Mr. President, for 40 million Americans. Are they satisfied now? Or does the far left want more? Surely Democrats have hit enough milestones. The election is over. Democrats now have the extremely dubious honor of being responsible for the longest government shutdown in American history. So the question is, Mr. President, can the American people get a break now? Democrats should be embarrassed. Embarrassed that federal workers are lining up at food banks and missing bills and in danger of losing homes or cars because Democrats can't summon enough members to support a clean, nonpartisan funding resolution. That's right, Mr. President, a clean, nonpartisan funding bill sitting right here at the Senate desk. We've not asked Democrats to support a single new Republican policy. We haven't asked them to support a single partisan policy rider. We simply asked them to extend current funding levels for a few weeks so that we could have time to do bipartisan work on appropriations bills. But Democrats couldn't take yes for an answer. And on the subject of appropriations, Mr. President, if any Democrats cherish the faintest hope of still funding the government through a full-year appropriations process, a process that they've displayed, or I should say delayed, for 5 weeks and counting, they should vote for the clean, nonpartisan CR today. Mr. President, I realize that Democrats have been under a lot of pressure from their far-left base to keep the shutdown going. And I assume that it was pressure from Democrats' far-left base that saw the Democrat leader flip his position on shutdowns 180 degrees in the space of just 6 months. And I realize that there are a number of Democrats in the Senate who are not just yielding to pressure from the far left, but are themselves members of the far left and are happy to continue the shutdown forever, if it means somehow sticking it, they think, to President Trump. But I'm hoping there are still Democrats out there who can see beyond the political extremism of their leftist base. And I hope there are some Democrats who can take an honest look at the widespread damage that their shutdown is doing and say enough is enough. Thanksgiving is rapidly approaching. Parents are starting to think about what they're going to put under the tree. The Democrats still want federal employees lining up at food banks at Thanksgiving, at Christmas. And on the topic of the holidays, it's an open question whether people will be able to spend it with their families this year if the shutdown continues. Air traffic has been snarled for weeks as a result of Democrat shutdown, and things are getting worse. The Transportation Secretary just announced yesterday that the government may be forced to close parts of our airspace if the shutdown continues into next week. Close airspace, Mr. President. Think about that. And I could go on. I could talk about the unions asking Democrats to end this shutdown and support a clean continuing resolution. I could talk about the business organizations making the same request. I could read the headlines about Head Start preschools closing and SNAP recipients who are worried about their benefits and National Guard units who aren't training, and on and on. Every single thing as a result of Democrats' decision to shut down the government more than 5 weeks ago. But surely, Mr. President, surely, there are at least some Democrats senators who can see this for themselves. See this for themselves and realize it is past time to end this before the damage gets even worse. Mr. President, it's day 36 of Democrats' shutdown. Day 36. How much longer are Democrats going to make the American people suffer? Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks.
Mr. President.
Majority Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, 1 year ago today, the American people rejected high prices, they rejected open borders, they rejected the weakness of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. 1 year ago today, the American people voted to get America back on track. And they did so by voting for unified Republican government. And Republicans won a historic victory. President Trump won every single battleground state in America. He won the popular vote. He moved over close to 3,000 counties to the right. That's 89% of the counties in the United States. Senate Republicans won a 53-seat majority, and House Republicans maintained the majority as well. Americans gave us a mandate to secure the border, to rebuild the economy, to unleash American energy, and to restore America's strength. Here we are 1 year later, and America is back on track. The results are undeniable. For the first time in years, America's borders are secure. For the last 5 months, absolutely zero illegal immigrants have been released into our nation. Gone are the days under Joe Biden when 10,000 illegal immigrants poured into our country each and every day. When Joe Biden was president, over 10 million illegal immigrants flooded into our nation. Illegal immigrants were incentivized to come here with a promise of free health care, with a promise of free airplane tickets, with a promise of free hotel rooms and free food and free meals and free cell phones. Mr. President, that era is over. President Trump is successfully removing illegal immigrant criminals from our nation, taking them away from communities all across the country. Republicans in Congress are finishing the wall, hiring more border agents, and investing in immigration and customs enforcement. The drug cartels are clearly on notice, Mr. President. The border is closed, and America is once again protecting our citizens. Today, our communities are safer, and the economic turnaround has been equally dramatic. America's energy dominance is back. Gas prices have dropped to the lowest point in 4 years. AAA reports prices are expected to continue to fall and perhaps stay low over the busy Thanksgiving period that's upcoming. Inflation has cooled. Things are more affordable. Remember, under Joe Biden, prices soared by more than 21%. Under President Trump, private sector real wages are up over $1,100 a year. The economy grew 3.8% in the second quarter of this year. We're seeing strong economic growth, and more strong economic growth is expected. The Atlanta Federal Reserve predicts third quarter growth could be 4%, even greater economic growth. You might ask yourself, what is at the heart of this economic comeback? Well, let me tell you. The working family tax cuts, which passed the Senate, passed the House, signed into law by the President. That's at the heart of our economic comeback. This is the most pro-worker, pro-family tax relief in years. In Wyoming alone, families could save $2,400 this year because of the tax cuts. Waiters, barbers, bartenders keep $1,300 more by having to pay no tax on tips. In my home state and in yours, Mr. President, nurses, firefighters, and police officers can keep $1,400 more by having to pay no tax on overtime. New parents get a $1,000 Trump account for every newborn child to invest in their future. And parents get a bigger child tax credit, $2,200 more per child. Seniors are going to keep more as well. There's a new $6,000 deduction on Social Security income. Mr. President, clearly you've heard it, and I've heard it at home as well. Farmers, ranchers, and small business owners getting the relief from the much-dreaded death tax. That's what it means to stand with working Americans. Let's be clear. If the Democrats had had it their way, families would be paying much more in taxes, a lot more. Every single Democrat voted for the largest tax increase in American history. Every single Democrat voted for a $4 trillion tax increase. Had Democrats succeeded, families, seniors, and small businesses would have been financially crushed. Every Democrat voted for the government to take more of people's hard-earned money. Republicans said people should keep their hard-earned money. Republicans voted for Americans to keep what they earn. That's the difference between Republicans and Democrats. So 1 year ago, American voters rejected a weak America and also rejected a dangerous world. Today, we see the resurgence of American strength. We are defending our interests and deterring our enemies around the world. Military recruitment has surged to its highest level in 15 years. Morale is high. Deterrence is back. President Trump successfully crippled Iran's nuclear program. He strengthened the success of the Abrams Accord. He secured the release of the hostages in Gaza. He ended wars around the world not once, not twice, but 8 times. President Trump is the president of peace, and he's achieving this peace through American strength and leadership. Look, these are the policies that the Americans want, need, and voted for when they elected President Trump, President of the United States, once again. Regrettably, Senate Democrats still can't bring themselves to support the success. They voted against securing the border, against lowering taxes, against strengthening Medicaid, and against everything that helps working families. Here in the Senate, for months, they've delayed hundreds of routine and bipartisan nominees. It was an unprecedented blockade. Now Democrats have set a new, shameful record. Today, they broke the record for the longest government shutdown in American history. Let me repeat that. Today, the Democrats have broken the record for the longest shutdown in American history. During the 36 days of the Schumer shutdown, Democrats have voted against reopening the government 14 times. That's 14 votes against paying our troops, 14 votes against paying our federal workers, 14 votes against paying our air traffic controllers, 14 times against Border Patrol agents, and 14 times against paying our TSA agents. The Democrat Party has been hijacked by socialists, and now they're holding the American people hostage. Why? Well, it's because the Democrats have become radical and extreme. Gallup pollsters tell us that only 1 in 3 Democrats are proud to be an American. Can you imagine that? Only 1 in 3 registered Democrats proud to be an American. It's half the number it was last year. The party of JFK is gone, and it is now the party of AOC. Democrats are now the party of socialism and censorship, of weakness and wokeness. They tend to even brag about it, as we saw last night in New York. Yesterday in New York City, they elected as mayor a socialist who wants to defund the police, abolish prisons, and give illegal immigrants free health care. That's who the Democrats have chosen as the mayor of New York City. That's the Democrats' vision of America's future. It's a dangerous vision. It's a destructive vision. 1 year ago, Americans chose a better path. They chose safety, prosperity, and common sense. As a result, today, America is moving in the right direction, and we're going to continue to fight to get America back on track. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Democrat Webb.
Mr. President, my friend from Wyoming, my colleague on the Republican side, just gave a...
President.
Senator for Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to waive the mandatory quorum call with respect to the Orr nomination.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. SNAP benefits, that has been in the news and a topic of much discussion. And those benefits for over 40 million Americans lapsed over the weekend because Democrats have chosen to hold government funding hostage for political leverage, their word, at the American people's expense. In other words, they're using the American people as pawns. And because of that, their constituents, and indeed nearly 700,000 Tennesseans, are without their SNAP benefits. So are our Border Patrol agents, our air traffic controllers, and federal law enforcement. They've been working a month now without pay. This is why you have the AFGE and the Controllers Union. They're saying in the Schumer shutdown now. We also know that critical federal assistance from rural development programs to small business loans are out there in jeopardy. Across the country, people and small businesses are all suffering because of Chuck Schumer and his Schumer shutdown. And for Democrats, I think they have wanted this. They planned for it, and they wanted to see it happen, so they got it. Now, over on the House side, the Democrat whip made it very clear during a recent interview, and I quote her. She said, "Shutdowns are terrible, and of course, there will be families that are going to suffer, but it is one of the few leverage times we have," end quote. So to the American people, realize that the Democrats you've elected see you as pawns and leverage and pieces that they can move around a chessboard. As the Senate Democrat leader said at the beginning of the shutdown, and I quote him, "Every day gets better for Democrats." They see this as improving their political chances. And over the last month, his party has voted more than a dozen times to keep the government shut down. And at the heart of their demands is the permanent extension of President Biden's COVID credits under Obamacare. Now, this would be a $450 billion expense to the U.S. taxpayer. Last week, I was on the floor talking about this and about how Democrats are peddling falsehoods to try to justify their Schumer shutdown. They claim that Obamacare subsidies are going to expire. Now, in reality, it is only the Biden COVID credit bonus that will expire. Now, what happened during COVID for the Obamacare subsidies? They took off the income caps, and a lot of people had $0 premiums. And if you were making over $500,000 a year, you too could get a Biden COVID credit bonus, and subsidy from the Obamacare exchange. You too could have the U.S. taxpayer picking up the tab for 80 to 90% of your health insurance because they plussed up the credit and they removed the income caps. Now, the original Obamacare subsidies, which, by the way, do not expire, these are permanent, they are in law, the original subsidies continue for people who are at 100 to 400% of the federal poverty level. Now, our colleagues across the aisle claim that the Biden COVID credits are needed to keep the cost of health insurance premiums down. In reality, Obamacare is too expensive to afford without the subsidy. So what they're doing is propping up a broken system. In fact, since 2013, the Obamacare benchmark plan premium has increased by 237%, more than 3 times the rate for employer-sponsored health care plans that most Americans get through their work and from their employer. And as these premiums go up, taxpayers are on the hook to subsidize not the individual, but guess what? The insurance company. The subsidy doesn't go to the individual, it goes directly to the insurance company. Our colleagues on the other side of the aisle need to understand that their fight for government-run health care, which is really what this entire Schumer shutdown is all about, is going to fail. It's time for them to put the American people over and before far-left politics. It is time to reopen the federal government. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the next portion of my remarks be placed separately in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. We all are hearing quite a bit about AI and the potential of AI to transform entire industries for the better, to make them more efficient. In Tennessee alone, our advanced manufacturers are using it to become more efficient, to lower cost, and to increase productivity. Healthcare providers are using it to strengthen care, and researchers are using it to discover new treatments. These are all things that are worth celebrating. They're good, and they're yielding good results. But we also know that this emerging technology can be used for harm. Now, in the case of Google, its AI models have targeted conservatives with defamation for years. During a Senate Commerce Committee hearing last week, I presented evidence to Google's Vice President for Government Affairs and Public Policy that his company's AI models have repeatedly fabricated malicious stories about conservative activist Robbie Starbuck. He is a Tennessean, and he is a conservative leader in our state. In one instance, Google's large language model, Gemma, falsely claimed that Starbuck was accused of child rape and that I publicly defended him. Google's AI models have also falsely accused him of being a former adult film star, of facing criminal drug charges, and of shooting a man in Nashville in an argument over a parking spot. In response, Google's VP claimed that hallucinations among their AI models are a common problem, and that the company is working on it, as if this harmful defamation is merely a technical glitch, and they refer to it as a hallucination. In fact, there seems to be a pattern of malicious lying and fiction when it comes to conservatives. So I asked the AI model, Has Marsha Blackburn been accused of rape? The answer to this question, of course, is an unequivocal no. I never have. Yet, Gemma fabricated an entire outlandish criminal allegation against me. It had a massive story about a race in 1987, which didn't happen, and of accusations of improper conduct, which did not happen. And it also came forward with an alleged victim. It was all malicious. It was all made up. It was all a lie. Yet, Gemma even generated fake links to fabricate news articles to support the defamatory claim. And of course, the links didn't work. This marks a catastrophic failure of oversight of an AI model that has been downloaded by more than 200 million people. So last week, I sent a letter over to Google CEO Sundar Pichai demanding an explanation as to why Gemma was creating these false allegations, criminal allegations, against conservatives and also against me. And I also asked for a list of steps the company is taking to eliminate political bias and defamatory content from its models. Now, Google has not responded to my letter. What they did do was take Gemma down over the weekend. Despite the AI model's serious flaws, the big tech giant said in a statement that it's going to continue to work to make Gemma available to their developers. And the message on this is clear. You need to shut it down. You need to shut it down completely. You need to shut the Gemini system down completely. The American public deserves to know that with these AI models, the information is going to be accurate, it is going to be transparent, it is going to be fair, and it is not going to be a tool that is going to be used to fabricate and to smear conservatives. In the meantime, Google has until tomorrow to respond to the letter demanding answers. And it's important to keep in mind, this is the same Google that operated a Gmail blacklist that suppressed Republican fundraising emails as spam. And it's the same Google that manipulated search results about the 2024 election to benefit Kamala Harris and to harm President Trump. And it's the same Google that suppressed search results of the attempted assassination of President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. Big tech has waged a war on conservatives for too long. It is time that the American people see accountability out of these platforms. I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session and resume consideration of the following nomination, which the clerk will report.
Nomination, the judiciary, Eric Chun-Yi Tung of California to be United States Circuit Judge for the Ninth Circuit.
The question occurs on the nomination. Is there a first and second? There appears to be. Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Also-Brooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Blumenthal.
Exciting. On this vote, the yeas are 57, the nays are 41. The motion is agreed to. The clerk will report the nomination.
Department of State, Caleb Orr of Texas, to be Assistant Secretary, Economic and Business Affairs.
Mr. President,
Senator from Kentucky.
I know that many of our colleagues and the American people have seen the tragic news out of my hometown just yesterday. And I'm grateful for their thoughts and their prayers this morning directed toward the people of Louisville. Folks around our county, Jefferson County, need those prayers right now in the days and weeks to come. The death toll from last evening's UPS crash has continued to rise throughout the day. For the families of these victims and for the injured survivors being treated at area hospitals, life will never be the same. There's a lot of grief welling up right now in Kentucky. This would be true even in the case of a single life lost. But as local first responders, state officials, and federal investigators continue their work today, I'd like to help our colleagues understand what makes this tragedy such a gut punch in a place like Louisville. During the day, Louisville International hums with thousands of passengers from all across the country. But around the clock, Louisville is also a hub for global shipping and logistics, business supplies, consumer goods, Christmas gifts. If it's going somewhere in short order, there's a very good chance it's passing through UPS Worldport in my hometown of Louisville. None of this is possible without teams of devoted professionals. Louisville is home to logistics experts, warehouse workers, aircraft crew, and maintenance. They take pride in their work, and their community takes pride in them. That's why this crash cuts so deep. It's about all of us. Today, Jefferson County schools and many local businesses are completely closed. Neighbors are mourning neighbors, so today will be a tough day in the Commonwealth. But the people of Louisville are grateful for the swift, life-saving efforts of our first responders from local police, fire, and EMS. They can trust in the prayers of their fellow Americans. And I want them to know that their representatives here in Washington are making sure that every federal resource they need is on the ground and headed their way soon. I spoke with Mayor Greenberg this morning, and my team and I will continue to stay in close contact with local, state, and federal officials, including at the FAA and the NTSB in the coming days. But first and foremost, I'm keeping my fellow Kentuckians in my prayers and asking our colleagues to do the same. I suggest you have so quorum.
Clerk, call the roll.
Ms. Alster-Brooks.
Mr. President,
Senator from Iowa.
thank you, Mr. President. I come to the Senate floor today to express my concern about recent attacks on the legitimacy of the judicial branch of government. A fair and neutral judiciary plays a very indispensable role in our constitutional structure. Judges wield enormous power, and their decisions determine the legal rights of the parties before them. One especially potent power of the judiciary is the practice of judicial review. As we all know, the judiciary sometimes decides cases that impact the operation of laws passed by Congress or the actions of the executive branch. We accept this judicial review because neutral arbiters are necessary in a system based upon the rule of law, but this system only works if everyone accepts that the arbiters are, in fact, neutral, litigants, the co-equal branches of government, and the American people must be confident that judges are merely saying what the law is and not what those judges wish the law to be. Our judicial system also requires respect for appellate review. The federal courts are hierarchical, and the rule of law depends on public confidence that lower courts will faithfully apply and respect the decisions of the higher courts. It's no surprise that some people are not always happy with how the courts exercise judicial power. Criticism is fair and sometimes warranted, but too often it is strayed into outright attacks on the judiciary as an institution. Today, however, I'm here to discuss attacks on the judiciary coming particularly from a concerning place, that is, within the judiciary itself. It's one thing for the political branches or the public to criticize the Supreme Court. It's entirely different for federal judges themselves to undermine their own branch of government. In two high-profile instances in the last few months, numerous judges have anonymously, as you might expect, gone to the press to denigrate the Supreme Court, and this ought to be deeply concerning, not only to this senator, but the public at large. On September 4th, 2025, NBC News published a report alleging that 12 federal judges gave anonymous interviews, and 10 of them took that opportunity to criticize the Supreme Court. One judge described the Supreme Court's conduct as, quote, unquote, inexcusable. And another judge said the Supreme Court, quote, is effectively assisting the Trump administration in undermining the lower courts, end of quote. Then we have a big hit piece by the New York Times on October the 11th, 2025. That newspaper ran a story where they sought out judges specifically to criticize the Supreme Court. the Times approached 400 of the almost 1,500 federal judges with questionnaires. The Times intentionally solicited judges in districts that litigants considered to be unfavorable to the current president. Of the 400 judges approached, thank God only a small percentage took the offer. I think this is an important point. Then we can draw the conclusion most federal judges didn't take the bait of the New York Times because it violated the ethics of the judiciary. So only a small percentage did, but that's still a fabulous 65 judges responding to the Times questionnaire. And it happens that some responded with very harsh criticism. They gave the Times then the fodder that they needed to spin the narrative of a judiciary in crisis. The Times wrote, quote, "Federal judges called the Supreme Court emergency orders mystical, overly blunt, incredibly demoralizing and troubling," and another quote, "a slap in the face to the district courts." One judge compared their district's current relationship with the Supreme Court to, quote unquote, a war zone. Another said the courts were in the midst of, their words, a judicial crisis. I'm deeply concerned, and I hope the public at large is, that these public attacks on the court from sitting federal judges damage the public's faith and confidence in our judicial system. When judges call the legitimacy of their own branch of government into question, they erode the faith of the institutions itself. My colleague, the chairman of the Committee on Judiciary in the House of Representatives, shares these concerns. Together, we sent a letter of concern to Chief Justice Roberts. We expressed our concern that the conduct of the judges, as reported, may violate the applicable ethical canons. We also asked whether the judicial branch will give guidance to federal judges or even investigate this matter. The document called the Code of Conduct for United States Judges is very clear that judges have an obligation to uphold public confidence in the judiciary. For example, Canon 2 states, and I quote, "A judge should act at all times in a manner that promotes public confidence in the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary," end of quote. In 2024, Chief Judge Diaz of the Fourth Circuit applied the canon in resolving a judicial complaint against a judge for authoring an opinion piece lambasting a sitting Supreme Court justice. He concluded that the judge in question violated the canons and, quote, diminished the public confidence in the integrity and independence of the federal judiciary, end quote. Chief Judge Diaz reasoning appears to apply with similar force to the recent anonymous attacks on the court. Anonymous, public comments from sitting judges describing the relationship between the Supreme Court and lower courts as a quote-unquote war zone, and otherwise attacking the legitimacy of the Supreme Court rulings, undermines public confidence in the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary. In fact, it may violate the code of conduct. Judges shouldn't mimic the infighting and rhetorical attacks that are so common among us in the political arena. This damages the public faith in the judiciary. The Supreme Court is then a uniquely American institution that has played an important role since our public's founding, and in contrast to the other branches, meaning the political branches of the federal government, the Supreme Court is meant to stand above the day-to-day squabbles of politics. And that's not just the Supreme Court, as I implied, that's the entire, every level of the judicial branch. For the most part, the court does this remarkably well, speaking of the Supreme Court. We know this because neither Democrats or Republicans are always happy with the decision of our highest court. The court is either too conservative or too liberal, depending on the day and who you ask. But at the bottom, the job of the court is not to please us or agree with us, but to say what the law is. In recent years, we've seen vicious attacks against the court from a variety of directions, many aimed at weakening public confidence in this important institution. This is bad for all of us. So today, I'm here to defend the integrity of the Supreme Court and to urge the judicial branch to address these attacks that are coming from within, mostly by district court judges and the ones that reply to everything anonymously and really don't have the guts to stand publicly with their criticism of the Supreme Court. So here is my bottom line. I call on the federal judiciary to give clear guidance to federal judges on acceptable public commentary and to take seriously the public's perception and confidence in the courts. I yield the floor.
On this vote, the yeas are 57, the nays are 43. The nomination is confirmed. Under the previous order, the motion to reconsider is considered made and laid upon the table, and the President will be immediately notified of the Senate's action.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to resume legislative session.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I'm going to be uncharacteristically brief. Tomorrow, I will be bringing two bills before the Senate. They both have to do with the shutdown and Congressional Bay. The first bill is the No Shutdown Paychecks Act. The second bill is the Withhold Member Pay During Shutdowns Act. The first bill would provide that as long as we're shut down, and I'll explain why in a moment, as long as we're shut down, no member of Congress can be paid. And the money will not be reimbursed at a later date or repaid at a later date. The second bill, to address any 27th Amendment concerns, will say during the shutdown, members of Congress will not receive their pay, but their pay will be escrowed and they will receive it after the government is opened back up. Look, we're in day 36. Like you, Mr. President, I've heard a lot of rumors about we're that close to reaching an agreement. We've been that close for a week. Frankly, I hope I'm wrong in saying this, but I don't think we're really that close. I wish we were, and I hope we are. But I think we're going to be in the shutdown a while longer. That doesn't give me any joy to say that. In the meantime, none of our staffs are being paid. No federal employees are being paid. I got some numbers in this morning that federal workers have had to borrow $365 million so far during this 36-day shutdown in order just to pay their rent. Our military is only being paid partially. Our air traffic controllers are not being paid. People who receive SNAP payments are only being partially paid. I don't think anybody wants to see anybody go hungry in America, and that's not a partisan statement. I think that's a bipartisan statement. There's precedent for this, Mr. President. Some may say, well, this violates the 27th Amendment. I don't think it does. That's why I'm offering two different flavors of bills. But in 2013, President Obama did the same thing that I'm doing now. They were in a shutdown, and President Obama supported legislation that said, if you don't open up government by this certain date, then you're going to lose your paychecks. And guess what? Members of Congress had an epiphany, and they found religion. They had a Damascene moment, and they opened up government. And that's all this bill will do. I'm not trying to grandstand. I wasn't going to bring this bill. When I got back here Monday, I heard all the rumors like everybody else that we were close. And I hope we are close, but we're not close enough. And so I'll offer these bills tomorrow, and people can vote yay or they can vote nay. But what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield to my friend Senator Blumenthal, if that's appropriate. I don't yield, Mr. President. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Ms. Also Brooks.
I recognize the Majority Whip.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I have 7 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and the minority leaders.
Duly noted.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the consideration of S-Res 484, which is at the desk.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 484 designating October 2025 as School Bus Safety Month.
Is there an objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there an objection? Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the consideration of S-Res 485, which is at the desk.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 485 designating the month of October 2025 as National Military Toxic Exposures Awareness Month.
Is there an objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
Mr. President, I know of no further debate.
Is there further debate? Hearing none, the question is on the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The resolution is adopted.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the preamble be agreed to and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there an objection? Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it stands adjourned until 10 a.m. on Thursday, November 6th, that following the prayer and the pledge, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, the morning hour be deemed expired, the time for the 2 leaders be reserved for their use later in the day, and the Senate be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each. Further, Mr. President, if Senator Kane makes a motion to discharge SJ Res 90, the Senate vote on that motion to discharge at 5 p.m.
Without objection.
Mr. President, no further business to come before the Senate. I ask that it stand adjourned under the previous order.
The Senate's adjourned.